I'd like, awesome. I'd like to welcome everyone, and it's good to see everybody on this sunny day here in Minneapolis, and to see all your beautiful faces. It's pretty awesome. So thank you for your presence, and I'm happy and grateful to introduce our guest speaker today. Yes, Goryu Jen Racho. Jen Racho is she, her, and she began practicing Buddhist meditation in 2003. First in the Soto Zen tradition, later in the Insight Vipassana tradition. She has attended several month-long meditation retreats. Jen's spiritual practice is deeply influenced by indigenous and earth-based wisdom. She is passionate about making accessible the healing and liberatory potential of Buddhist meditation. Jen is a Dharma teacher in training and co-leader of the BIPOC sangha at Common Ground. And we are so honored, Goryu Jen, for your practice and your presence here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Anryu. How's my sound, everybody? Is it good? Great, great. Magandang umaga. Good morning. Thank you, Hokioji, for hosting me, Anryu, for the invitation. And just want to, I don't know, kind of take everybody's faces in for a moment here. I invite folks to look around the Zoom room. Few folks, Patrice, wonderful to see you, I know, and other folks, nice to meet you. Still getting used to the virtual world, but also just really want to just name and pause how what a gift it is to be able to come together in all of our different places. I am sitting here in the half upstairs of our house, my wife and I in South Minneapolis, on the homelands of the Dakota people, just a few miles west of the Wankpatanka, the Great River, the Mississippi River. And I'll say a little bit more about myself as well. And so I came to Minneapolis by way of growing up in the suburbs of Chicago. My parents immigrated here from the Philippines via Guam. And so I have lived most of my life in the US. As Anryu mentioned, my spiritual practice has journeyed through different forms and places as well. I'll talk more about that. But want to honor and offer gratitude for formal teachers like Anryu and folks at MZMC, where I started my practice, folks at Common Ground, Mark and Shelley, Sosan at Clouds and Water, Carol at Braided Wisdom. I'm feeling very humbled as well as supported in this moment. And so I really appreciate that. I feel really supported by the elements too. And maybe not just because it's a really beautiful fall day here. The sun is coming out, the sky is blue, and I'm feeling the charge of the change in seasons. So that's how I'm arriving today. And Anryu invited me to give a way-seeking mind talk. And so that is generally what I'll be doing this morning. And so I took a pause and thought and asked, where does this phrase way-seeking mind come from? What does it mean to be a way seeker on the path of liberation? And for me, it's a combination of liberation, wholeness, and healing. And so I looked for some other different definitions of way seeking, and Reverend Leon Schutt described it in three different ways that really resonated me. One is that our heart and minds are seeking the way continuously. Um, Another is that the way is seeking us continuously. And the third, which I think is pretty provocative and really speaks to me and might be a little bit of a theme for my talk, is as way seekers, we seek to know that we are already part of the way. In fact, we are never apart from it. So I'll say that again. As way seekers, we seek to know that we are already part of the way. In fact, we are never apart from it. And so to me, that suggests kind of a coming home or a coming back again. And my my journey, my path, I think has some of those themes of coming home. And speaking of coming home, I was remembering one of the strongest memories I have in my early practice was actually at Hokyoji, um, uh, more than 15 years ago. It was one of the first, I think, multi-day retreats I did in the Twin Cities. And it was a pretty warm day, and we got our meals. I believe, I think it was a formal session. We got our meals. It was also a nice day. And so I looked at my plate. We were all eating outside. I don't know how many buildings were built yet, but we're eating outside. I got my plate and I'm looking around at this beautiful scenery and I'm like, oh, where should I eat? And so I start going to different places under this tree, up the hill where the honorings of category Roshi is moving. I'm like, trying to find a perfect spot of where I can enjoy this meal and going, going, going. And then I realized I have about 5.5 minutes left to eat my meal. And I was like, oh, wow. So I go back to where I got my meal a few feet away, sat down, and as mindfully as I could, tried to eat my meal in 5 minutes with a little bit of presence. But it was a great teaching for me in terms of my gaining mind, wanting something to be right, wanting something to be good, and how much energy, habitual energy I had to do that in a simple practice of eating in a sesshin, where I'm already hopefully trying to absorb the teachings in different ways. But I share that story because I came back to where I actually got my food and just sat down. And so that's what a little bit of 20 years of practice it feels like now is for me. Um, and so, I did start my practice mostly in Soto Zen. And so I practice at MZMC, I practice at Green Gulch for a practice period. And then I also started to get interested in Vipassana. So about the next 7 years was more Vipassana practice. Um, the contrasts in both traditions, I think, really provide um, just different entryways for this heart, mind, and body. And the last 7 years of my practice, I'll call it more of a braiding practice of several different traditions, and I'll talk more about that. Um, but one story, another story, maybe I already told one about how the practice started for me is that I actually fell in love with the path because I fell in love with Oryoki. And I know some folks may have a love-hate relationship with oryoki, which is a formal ritualized way of eating during a Zen sesshin. Um, but it was a path for me, and I'll share why. And I actually didn't learn oryoki in Zen. I learned it at a Shambhala. One of the first retreats I went to ever was a Shambhala retreat in Vermont. But they had brought that practice. And so this is, I'm very green coming into this retreat, having only done one full day retreat ever, but really curious about what was happening. And I was going into a practice period, I think a 3-month practice period that I was planning on staying only for 5 days. And so I get to Vermont, very rural area. They put me in a room, and it's almost dinner time. And so they put me in a room with what I later found out was a senior teacher to teach me this oryoki. And I was pretty open. I was like, okay, it seems really beautiful. Let's do this. And he did it with such reverence that I was just taken by that. And then it was time for the mealtime in the meditation hall. They don't call it a zendo. And so, there's, I don't know, at least 50, 60 people in this big hall, and the oryoki starts. And I'm in the back, towards the back with this teacher, and I am fully mesmerized by what is happening around me. And I think it was partly because it was foreign. And so I didn't have any preconceptions of what I thought it should be, or I didn't have a whole lot of judgments. I was just taken by the intimacy and the sacredness of the form. And there was something in my body, past lives, minds, where I was fully enraptured by it. And so, as some of you may know, at the end of oryoki, everyone takes the bowls that they have and kind of wraps them in a very specific way. And I, obviously didn't really know how to wrap my bowls. I was just following the teacher who was sitting next to me, who was really patient. He just was leading me through it, and I was just following along. And we get to the tying at the end, and he, looking back now, I'm surprised he just didn't sort of speed that up, to get it done. But he took me through that, and we're done. And then we bowed, and then I looked up, and I realized the room was totally still. Everybody else had been done, who knows, 5, 10 minutes ago. But this teacher thought it was so important for me to learn, and I felt like he thought it was important for the other people in the room to learn as well, this practice of patience and sacredness. Um, and so I took that as one of the kind of early teaching of what inclusion really means. And it taught me this idea of, again, as someone with sort of a, not sort of, but someone with the very strong habits of gaining and attaining and wanting something to be right and good, and to be seen as someone who is right and good. It was a real lesson in, it wasn't about finishing that meal on time or getting to the next activity in the retreat. There was nothing to attain except this practice of being present with and attending with what is in front of us. So that's why oryoki holds a really sacred and special place in my heart. And that ritual, I'm fortunate, I think, because in Zen, the rituals really spoke to me, partly because I grew up Catholic and have mostly a very positive association with my Catholic upbringing and the rituals I partake in it. But there is something about the bowing and the chanting that I think, because we use that physical form of our bodies, it helps us get rid of the attachment and ideas that we have to our minds, and this just very strong, I think, inherent need to understand something intellectually. That was one of the other things that really hooked me into Zen, was at least what I heard. I forget what chant it is. I think it's Dogen, where he says to put aside the intellectual understanding and to take our seat. And I remember hearing that for the first couple of times, and I think intuitively something in me said, "Oh, that's good. That is right." Um, and so I appreciate ceremony and ritual for that reason. And what I've come to appreciate is that I can, when I have, I'm going to call it a ritual, but it doesn't need to be a ritual, formal ritual in a meditation hall or a zendo. I'm speaking of ritual as in lighting a candle in my altar, or for some reason, for me, being in the kitchen, probably because of Zen, and it's emphasis on daily life and spiritual practice and zazen. Uh, Opening cupboards in the kitchen or the refrigerator for me is a form of a little bit of ritual and coming back. I'm very aware of my arm and hand reaching and the motion, and it's a practice I use to bring myself back into the body. Um, I'll share this quote from Zenju Earthlyn Manuel, who wrote the Shamanic Bones of Zen, that I really like and speaks to what I'm trying to talk about. She says, in my life, an inner temple was revealed in chanting and meditation. It tied together my dreams, deep intuition, and a natural inclination towards Zen as a way of life. It brings mysticism and meditation together into a place of wholeness. Zen for me has something to do with using the physicality of life, to use form, which is to use the body, to experience the unseen and invisible dimensions of life. We are not doing something. We are being led to an alignment with the unseen, suchness, the inexpressible, and the unsurpassable. So ritual is what has kept me and grounds me in Zen. And so I mentioned I also practice Vipassana. And Vipassana has provided me with, in some ways, I think of Zen as you learn by doing. And Zen is just a little bit more learning by understanding. And so it gave me some more details on the process of meditation. Um, and on an energetic level, it felt a little softer to me. The felt sense of it was a little more heart focused. And I think partly, and I think that's simply of my own experience of Zen and Vipassana. I'm not trying to make generalizations here. But my felt sense of it was that it was also more feminine. And so it spoke to more aspects of my being, which I've come to realize is really important and necessary for my path to move along, bringing all parts of my identities, all parts of my questions, all parts of my traditions. So I'll talk a little bit more now about, I think I mentioned kind of the last 7 years of my practice has been about braiding different traditions. And one of that braiding really started, I think, as I began to be more aware of my own racialized body. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, predominantly white neighborhood. And I was very blessed with having a large, extended, and social Filipino network. And so I grew up in these, kind of two worlds. I grew up in a middle upper class family. Both my parents were professionals. I kind of broke the boundaries of being a female Asian or female Filipino because I like sports. I really pushed the boundaries, as my mom will attest to what she thought was um, uh, a way to be appropriate and safe as a female Asian living in America. Um, and and so it wasn't actually until my late 30s that I really started to grapple with my own internalized racism, how I had, through the process of assimilation, um, picked up some dominant ideas of that white culture was inherently better than other cultures of color. And I started to unravel how that really influenced how I view the world, how I viewed myself and other people, um, and what that meant kind of on a systemic level too. And so, um, I was kind of well into my practice by this point. So I started to turn to other teachers of color, um, Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, Lama Rod Owens, to see how they were talking about this dynamic that I myself was just kind of waking up to. And it was extremely supportive. Um, I remember this was at Spirit Rock Meditation Center of Vipassana Center. I was going there for my first long 1 month silent retreat. And I don't know, this was maybe 2022. And of the 5 teachers on stage, um, 3 were people of color. And I knew this coming into the retreat. Like and that was partly what drew me to it. So I knew, but when I got to the meditation hall and saw those teachers on stage, and I think they strategically put them in the center, in the middle, I started to cry. Um, and and um, and that was not a reaction I had expected. But and it was um, it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know. I hadn't really realized the longing that I had to see the Dharma expressed in ways and bodies that I was able to connect with more. Um, and so I share that partly because it's a really important part of my path. Um, and also, uh, what is the reason? And also because I think it's a view that isn't necessarily shared um, in Zen spaces. Um, and I offer it as a invitation to just consider um, uh, consider another perspective, another experience. Um, because one of the things that I feel like um, Zen and Buddhism has instilled in me is this commitment, this vow to understand, a vow to see clearly, um, and um, I recently heard of a phrase in boxing, which is something like uh, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. And I'm not sure that was supposed to come later in my talk. I don't know why I brought it in now, but I am feeling both on a personal level, like in my immediate life and collectively, that we're taking some punches. Um, and so I think I brought that in because um, this vow to see clearly is really alive for me. And what does that vow mean in this time when I feel my own suffering, other people suffering? I feel the suffering of harm that I've done. Um, and so it's I don't know, it's a tender time. And so I think a lot about how am I showing up in my practice and what does my practice mean. Um, and I'll quote, I was looking back at Shohaku Okumura's book, Living by Vow, and I'll read you something that was helpful for me. He says, vow is essential for all bodhisattvas. In fact, part of definition of a bodhisattva is someone who lives by vow instead of by karma. Karma means habit or preferences or a ready-made system of values. As we grow up, we learn a system of values from the culture around us. and we use it to evaluate the world and choose our actions. This is karma, and living by karma. This is karma and living by karma. In contrast, a bodhisattva lives by vow. A vow is like a magnet or compass that shows us the direction towards the Buddha. And what I really appreciate about that teaching is that Okamura calls out how the culture around us shapes our values, our beliefs, and our worldviews, which shapes how we act and co-create the world that we're living in. And so, both personally and my sense collectively is I feel called to, in some ways sort of go back and look at how my cultural and social conditioning is shaping who I am and how I'm responding or not responding in this moment, in order to really live up my bodhisattva vow. And so part of what I feel like I'm, in a sense, doubling down on is, I really appreciate the Mahayana grounding of this commitment to free myself and all beings, and that that is one and the same. But my vow isn't to a certain path. It isn't to a particular form or ritual or practice, even though I may love certain rituals. It isn't to Zen or Dogen or the Pali Canon. It isn't to 30-day silent meditation retreats. It feels like my vow now is to really cultivate the conditions, whatever they are, that support me in waking up, support me in seeing clearly, opening my heart, creating a sense of tenderness and patience, humility, and reclaiming joy and rest, and seeing the beauty in that is alongside with and is also part of suffering. And part of the reason I talk about not being tied to any one practice is because, I think, as I've mentioned, the past 7 years, I've braided different practices along with the Zen and Vipassana. And it's not even really a braiding, but more of a coming home to. I had the fortune to spend some time in Toshoji, which is an international Zen monastery in Japan. And I spent there a week, and it's my first time in Japan. And one of the things I really appreciated in Japan was the blending of um, the Buddhism and the shrines to the elements and spirit guides. I believe Shinto is an indigenous religion in Japan. And so it was everywhere, and it was mixed, um, and tapping into this indigenous sense of spirituality, whether that be through an exploration of my Filipina indigenous traditions, the fortune of being part of Native American indigenous traditions, and just earth-based wisdom, the elements, seasons, ancestor practice, which I'm actually coming back to is I don't think it's necessarily separate from Zen. I think those practices and those elements are really steeped into Zen practice, but may not just be as uh, uh, we don't shine a light, it feels like, at least for me, on those practices on Western Zen here in the US. Um, Another part of the practice that I've been braiding is this real intention of cultivating a somatic and embodied presence, and tapping into the wisdom that is in our bodies. Um, in my own experience, the ability and capacity to fully embody, be aware of, and metabolize our emotions is, um, uh, I don't know, if I was going to make a new jewel, of the three jewels, that would be the fourth one, or maybe just emphasize it more in the first jewel of taking refuge in the Buddha. But um, it's been a significant practice for me to understand how to hold, see, and metabolize, especially emotions like grief, anger, shame, and joy. Um, and they do not feel separate from, um, I guess, our individual and collective suffering. And so part of my call now is to, um, I guess, shine a light on the importance of having that capacity, and sharing it for folks who want to reduce their suffering, um, and be free. Um, one of the uh, something that I heard when I was at Toshoji, and I don't know, so I cannot attribute this quote. I don't know if it was to a Zen priest who was visiting, or if he was quoting it to someplace else. But you know how when you hear something and it's like the hair in the back of your necks kind of stand up because you're like, oh, that means something to me. This was one of those quotes. He said, "The Dharma does not belong to any one person. It does not belong to the Buddha or Bodhisattvas or to Dogen Zenju. The Dharma belongs to whoever makes it their own." And so, in that spirit, that is how I have braided my practice. Um, and that is how I will continue to braid, and understand, and hopefully bring more um, joy. Um, it's hard to focus on joy when you have a really strong habit of attaining, or getting something right, um, because joy is, you know, a little bit of the absence of that. So I hope this talk was supportive. May all beings be safe and healthy. May they be protected from inner and outer harm. May they know joy and ease, and may they be happy.
Thank you, Goryu. That was beautiful. Before I bring my voice into the conversation, I just want to invite people to bring their voices into the circle. And if it's okay with you, Goryu, to ask questions and just reflections, offer that to you, that would be awesome. So I just invite people to please bring your voice in with any questions, reflections, or comments.
Jen, great to see you.
Great to see
Um,
you, Patricia.
um, it, uh, the phrase gaining mind is not a Vipassana phrase, so that one really kind of grabbed me about gaining mind. But I wondered if you could say a little bit more about how you are practicing, like given the incredible volatility of our time, the sense of urgency that I think a lot of us feel maybe. I mean, there's spiritual urgency, but I think also a lot of us just feel this kind of urgency about the current political conditions. And I'm just wondering um, if you could say more about how you're practicing with it. And I know that the elements practice about grounding in the earth has been really important. And I'm wondering if there's something that is done sort of more in a sangha way or inviting more than just yourself into a practice.
Yeah. Does it sound better? Okay. So I think I heard maybe two questions there, Patrice. One, well, I'm going to answer in two ways. You tell me if that's helpful. But how I'm practicing in these times, and you alluded to that. Use the word urgency several times, and I guess one of the ways I'm practicing is to actually check into that feeling of urgency, of where the urgency is coming from, because I think sometimes, urgency can come from a sense of fear, and not that any of our feelings or emotions are wrong or unwanted, but yeah, so sensing into this urgency feels important. And I always think a lot about balance in these times. And again, whether I am grounded, whether my body, heart, mind is actually grounded. You mentioned the elements practice. And if I am grounded, if I am not grounded, then what do I need to do to have a sense of balance? To have a sense of like my faculties with me, to not be, well, for me, I'm a visual person. So a lot of it is like, how much can I like literally see? So like a simple practice for me is to walk outside and to actually look at the tops of the trees because it lifts up my chest and I get to see sort of like a sky view. And there's another piece to this that I feel like is about a sense of humility. There's so much about what is happening now that is urgent, that is, I think, in some ways, for many of us, but not all of us, um, uh, a level of perhaps fear and stress that is unprecedented for some of us. And I always think of sort of like two sides of the same coin. And at the same time, um, all of these conditions have arisen naturally. Um, some of them may be horrifying to some, but all of them have arisen naturally. And so I'm like really not answering your question, but more just speaking to it because I don't really have any answers of how to practice. And I think that's why I really actually talked about this increasing our individual capacities to uh, embody and metabolize emotions. To me, collectively, and one of the things that I've been doing with a group of women for the past couple of years is practicing that because I don't think it will take. I don't think I don't think we need a majority of people necessarily to shift social conditions. But I do think we need a smaller percentage of people to really understand what that shift means on a cellular level. Thanks for your question, Patrice.
Thanks for your response.
I'll bring my voice in right now, if that's okay. I resonated with there's a Vipassana practitioner who's also my friend who uses the phrase being punched in the face. And so when you brought that forward, I felt joy. I mean, even though it's a kind of a powerful phrase, I felt joy because yeah, sometimes it feels like individually and collectively we're being punched in the face. So I really appreciated you bringing forward tenderness for um, myself in relationship to all beings because we're all kind of feeling punched in the face. So I just wanted to say thank you for that metaphor or that image because I feel it's very appropriate. And then the other thing I'd like to say is I really appreciated as a white-bodied Zen priest bringing into the conversation the need for multicultural representation and in order to there's 8 to 9 billion of us, and we look in many ways and many forms and non-forms, and to really honor all the forms and the formlessness and trying to create in communities where that representation is forward, I think is very important. So I just really appreciated you articulating that and bringing that forward because I feel that that helps to develop trust and safety within the community. So I don't really have a question. I just wanted to bring those two comments forward that you brought forward in your talk, and I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Anriu. Maybe I'll just add something about getting punched in the face. And I apologize if that image is perhaps a little bit too violent for a Sunday morning, but there are opportunities in my experience, especially when something kind of comes at you sideways, you weren't expecting it. In my experience, it can really challenge ideas that I've had about myself about who I am, and force me to evaluate my my actions, my thinkings, in a way that is, what's the phrase? Onward leading. Not getting stuck in the perhaps guilt, not running away from being accountable to harm that we might have caused, that I might have caused. I'm speaking very personally right now. Um, uh, but it's that place of sort of like agitation, confusion, that is, I think, our teachers will say is kind of fertile ground for, uh, you know, if we apply our heart, the heart of our practice in those moments, um, I think that's where some of the um, deepest fruits can manifest.
I invite people to please bring your voices into the circle. Yeah. Jushin?
I wanted to thank you for your talk, Jen, but just add that I also really love Hokyo Oryoki. So it's a great practice, and I miss the old days when we used to do it in the Zendo, because now we do it in Moss Hall, and I did really like it when we did it in the Zendo. It was very nice.
Thanks, Jushin. I didn't even talk about how much I love serving. I could do a whole talk on just uh, the the sweetness of serving in Oryoki and what that has taught me about the beauty of the deep intimacy in silence and in presence has always brought me joy. I haven't done it for quite a while, actually, and so um, it feels like at this again sort of turn in my practice, I'm returning back to the Zen forms for some grounding, actually, Patrice, going back to your question of like in this moment, uh, it feels like it would be really nourishing for me to go back to and not go back to or be in the spaces um, where the again the sacred, the practice, the forms take us out of our um, what's the word? It's not small minds, ordinary minds, I think, to touch into which something much more expansive, which I think is also an ingredient for how to be, how to respond in these times. But it's a real practice of holding both the absolute and the relative. And so mm, yeah, coming back to that for me seems like it would be really beneficial.
Jen, I'm going to have to follow up with Jushin because I like Orioke too. I really love it. And um, I did a 1 day session at Chapel. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I did a 1 day session up at Chapel Hill Zen Center, and they did the Orioke meal in the Zendo with servers. The whole thing. It was wonderful. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it before that. In the Zendo, it just adds more significance, you know, I mean, and the servers really have a very interesting and tight schedule that they have to meet in order to make sure everybody gets served in as quickly as possible and make sure that everybody that wants seconds gets seconds and so on. It's a wonderful practice and I really enjoy it. I wouldn't mind going back to, as you should suggest, perhaps more oryoki meals in the Zendo because it's wonderful. And I suppose they do that in Japan, I would imagine. I don't know. I've never been to Japan. So, but thank you, Jen, for your talk. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing your voice in, Yon and David. Yeah, I feel like maybe I should put a caveat to my like oryoki cheerleading session here, in the sense that like all forms, right? There's a slippery slope to being attached to the form, to getting it right, to feeling like the goal is to get it right or to get it done on time. And my understanding is that the essence is not that at all. And actually, in Tosoji in Japan, what was so beautiful about that for me, because it was such a inspiring place to be. There were Zen priests from all over the world. Um, there's maybe 7 or 8 languages being spoken at one time. When we read something, it was typically translated in at least 4 languages. But what I really appreciated about uh, the teaching aspect of the monastery was that there was very little like, oh no, don't do that because you got it wrong. There was such a like encouragement to engage in the practice, however you are, however you show up, and whatever you do. And it wasn't about like wrong or right or looking good. And that was really supportive because I have a very uh, I can have very competitive habits come out through me. Grow up in this culture, I can have very individual habits. And so I that's a little bit of what I mean by, you know, really kind of keeping aware of my social and cultural familial conditioning is, so that I can choose to um, to not live out of my karma, but to choose to be more aware of how I show up um, mm, in my life and with other people. Um, but yes, oryoki is a beautiful, beautiful practice.
Hi, now, thank you for your teaching on not becoming attached to the ritual because I realize that I want to make sure I know the ritual exactly the way it's supposed to be done. And that's not the object of the practice. It's the practice that's the important part. Thank you. Thank you very much for that teaching.
Hi, it was a very clear-headed talk. I really appreciate it. When I started at MZMC, they did oryoki in the zendos with benches. So there's an additional series of steps to take to put the benches down. And my knees were hurting so much already. And I didn't like oryoki at all for a long time because it was just painful. We had to sit there through the meal. And this I'm certain is why we all learned to eat so fast, was to get it done as quickly as possible, to be able to stand up and get out of the pain. But now Oryoki is a completely different thing for me, and I love serving. I love doing the Oryoki. I love the when new people do this become servers, it's like you can tell almost instantly whether they really are manifesting. Well, you manifest something internal when you're a server. And some people are just going through the motions and worried about whether they're doing it right. And some people really kind of get it, what it's about. So, but I'll tell you a little story that I've heard from Michael O'Neill Gempo. When he started Oryoki, he asked one of the priests at MZMC Norman um, to go through and teach him Oryoki, to show him what he did. That's the important phrase, to show him how he did Oryoki. And so Norm was showing him how he did Oryoki, and Genpo said, well, wait, that's not right. And Norm said, well, you asked me to show you what I did, not whether it was right or not. And I wanted to say something about the sense of kind of urgency. I This time of year, I I spend a lot of time planting things, and I have to say this kind of earthbound practice. I told a friend I was spreading clover seeds the other day. He said, "Oh, how Buddhist of you to spread seeds." Right? So, but I have spread about 8 pounds of clover, and apparently you can go to like a Fleet Farm and you can buy clover that's a deer attractant. This seems really unfair to me to be to be putting clover down that would be attracting deer for hunting season. But and I've planted over 250 daffodils, and I spread seeds for blue flax, and I've planted geraniums, wild geraniums, and it's like there's nothing that I appreciate more to settle me down than to dig a hole in the earth. This has really been an important practice for me to get through the climate that we're in, is just putting holes in the dirt and trying to grow things. Because I know not everything's going to grow. I've lost a lot of balsam when the power company came through after a power failure and cleared out some trees. And now some of my balsam were in full sun, and they don't like being in full sun, so they burned out. But so not everything's going to grow. So everything, the causes and conditions, it's just part of what goes on. But digging in the dirt really grounds me in a very substantial and significant way through this climate that we're in right now. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Jen. Appreciate you bringing your voice in. And also just want to note too that, again, these forms, Oryoki, you mentioned the capacity for being on your knees, and the physical pain that causes. And I hope that, as collectively as Buddhists, as we think about what it means I think about what it means to make the Buddhist path more accessible to all beings of different capacities, that we continue to be open to keeping the essence of the forms and practices, but expanding them in ways that meet people where they are. Again, keeping that essence and intention. Yeah, so I appreciate you sharing that and your grounding.
Back in 1990, when I first started practicing at Hokiochi, um, it was kind of a session for beginners, and but Suiko Redding took us all out to the picnic table and taught us the Oryoki form. So I have very fond memories of that you stirred, that has been stirred by this discussion this morning. And then later had others like Tosei Bob Osterman that helped with the training of serving, which it took me a few sessions to kind of relax into that and really get the flow. And it was just kind of overcoming that self-consciousness sort of thing, and just really feeling the present moment and relaxing with it. So appreciate your talk today. It was very wonderful.
Thanks for your practice and for being here, Frank. Appreciate that as well.
So I just really want to express our collective gratitude for Goryu Jen. And if you enjoyed today's talk by Goryu Jen, Jushin just put in the chat offerings and ways that we can continue to support her teachings through PayPal or Venmo. And as always, we appreciate your generosity on behalf of Hokioji. Thank you all very much. And I'd like to do the closing chant. Jushin?
Announcements?
Oh, do you
Oh,
have some?
I have some.
Okay, awesome.
So the Caring for the Land is wrapping up today. So thank you for all the people pulling buckthorn out and all that. I hope that's what they were doing. Something I saw pictures of fires, so I think there was a lot of that going on too. November 13th, both GD and Patrice will be leading Practicing the Ways retreat, Vipassana and Zen. That's the 13th through the 16th. Mark Anderson, and Melissa Link have Naturally Awake, the 19th through the 23rd. Rohatsu Session will be December 1st, and it's not too early to think about the winter practice period. That will start January 26th.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other announcements before I do the closing chant? Okay, good. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Thank you, Goryu. Thank you, everybody. It's
Thanks, everybody.
good to see you all.
Good to
Bye.
see you all too. Bye-bye.